Hey everybody, welcome back to Shrektober here on the Golden Bolt. Today we're taking a look at a kart racing game, Shrek Smash and Crash Racing on the Nintendo GameCube. I would hold the case up, but it's actually sitting right behind me. There's nothing holding it up, so I want to see when it falls over. That's it. You can cue the intro. Well, before we even get into the story, the game opens up with a full minute of scenes from the first two Shrek movies as an action montage, set to some high-tempo music. I'm guessing this is meant to sell you on the game and get you pumped, but none of this is gameplay. When that's over with and we start up the tournament mode, we're greeted with a cutscene of, "Oh my god, what happened to you, Shrek?" Shrek and Gingy are having a breath-holding competition, for some reason, and even though Shrek exhales before Gingy, somehow Gingy lost? Oh, Shrek is probably one of those, isn't he? Had to be player one all the time, used the best controller, and gave you the one with the chewed-up analog stick and the sticky buttons. He screamed, peeked, he cried to his mom that you were bullying him whenever he lost, he'd punch you in the arm when he won. Fuck you, Brad! Anyway, Donkey shows up with the fairy godmother's wand and starts hitting things with magic, spawning a cupcake car, a mossy version of Appa from Avatar, and so on. Gingy decides that he wants to race, and that's that. They race, the end. I'm obviously not going to score the story with how little there is here, and also considering it's a friggin' kart racing game, if you play them for the story, you're wrong. I, at the very least, appreciate that there was an attempt here, especially after the crap I played last year. Smash and Crash is an oddly competent kart racing game. You take control of one of 12 unique characters racing through 24 tracks. I put 24 in quotes there because they just mirrored the first 12 tracks and called them separate tracks. They are not. They are the same tracks, just mirrored. That said, the tracks are pretty varied, actually. Each of the 4 cups has 3 tracks, and in most of the cups there's a set theme and progression. You might be moving through the capital city of Far Far Away to get to the castle, or you might be trekking up a mountain into the dragon's lair. It's surprisingly cohesive. And what's weirder is that the tracks are actually good. Well, I mean, they're both good and bad. I'll explain. There's this sense of openness to them. At almost any point in the game, there are multiple paths for you to choose from. Some may take you in the blue or pink sparks, which will respectively speed you up or shoot you into the air. Others may give you an item barrel, and some paths are just plain there. There are even switches hidden on a few tracks that can take you through other, even more secret shortcuts. While sometimes this leads to sloppier design, harsh turns, walls to smack into, etc., this usually works pretty well. There are even times where I made my own shortcuts by jumping over a gap or straight up driving the wrong way to drop down to a lower point in the track. The tracks aren't a masterclass in course design, but for the game I'm playing, they're pretty good. Personal favorites include the mountain track, this farm track that starts off as a ripoff of Moo Moo Meadows from Mario Kart 64, but then turns into a ride up a tornado and down a beanstalk, and the downtown Far Far Away level. None of the levels are what I'd call bad, which is a good thing, but also with only 12 tracks, a single bad track could have tanked the entire game. Also, you know, a minimap would have been nice? I'm not sure why that's absent here. You accelerate with the A button and brake with the B button, and you can jump with R, use items with L, look behind you with Z, and you can even perform a special punch attack to nearby opponents or obstacles with Y. There's no drifting in this game like you'd usually expect from kart racers by this point, but you don't really need it. If you jump and turn yourself in midair, your kart will immediately continue in the direction you're facing upon landing. I used this to get the edge on several of the purple spark jumps that the game loves to use as a crutch. The AI is pretty competent too. They'll rubber band hard if you make a big mistake, so you can always catch up, but they don't rubber band unfairly if you're in the lead. Instead, the races are usually legitimately tense because all 6 racers are relatively close to one another. One mistake can sink you out of first, but you're never out of the race entirely if you play your cards right. With friends, the game is actually a bit of a blast too. The items, on the other hand, are perhaps a little too competent. There are 3 items you can drop behind you, all of which are functionally just a Mario Kart banana, and there are 2 speed boost items. Every thrown item will either softly home in on enemies if you throw in that direction, or just straight up red shell your opponents. Even though you can't throw items backwards, these things home in so well on enemies that they'll even fly behind you and take out 2 or 3 enemies at a time. Some of them have a strategic use, but when it comes down to it, there's never really a reason to hold on to them any longer than it takes you to get to the next item barrel. That's especially true in this game's battle mode. The stupid bird and balloon are supposed to be red shells, but they may as well be blue shells here. I can't even spawn without getting hit by one every few seconds. Fuck you, bird dick! Now for the straight up bad part. This game doesn't run well at all. At no point did the frame rate feel stable, and in the more ambitious stages, the frame rate is just terrible. There is screen tearing abound and motion blur everywhere, and the camera shakes all over sometimes. Hell, speaking of the camera, on tight turns it can't even keep up, so you're just staring at a wall and hoping there's not a hazard ahead of you. Some tracks are just full of poorly placed walls that, while they don't screw you out of a win entirely, they bring you to a stop. At least they also bring the computer racers to a stop too, I guess. None of this is ever enough to significantly cost me, but that's again because the game is designed simultaneously both poorly and well. Yeah, there are problems, but the problems screw everybody up, so it's an even playing field. It's a weird situation. However much enjoyment you have will be limited to how often you want to play the same tracks, and how many friends you can convince to join in. 12 is awfully low, even if they are fun the first couple times through. I know Double Dash only had 16 tracks, but there was the option to customize your kart and racer, multiple speeds and difficulties, and simply just more content. The closest you get here is that each character has slightly altered stats, but it's really not enough to make a huge difference. Despite me personally having a surprisingly good time with the game, Smash and Crash Racing simply doesn't have enough meat on the bone here. The several little issues it has all add up, making a bronze bolt the fair score for gameplay. Visually, Smash and Crash actually looks pretty solid. It's still a GameCube game, of course, but it's passable. There are a few times when characters look kind of off-model, but for the most part, they're pretty good. Jesus Christ, Dragon, what happened to you? Did Donkey hit you? Did he? Actually, wait, is Donkey's model the exact same one from Super Slam? I'm actually okay with this. That's thinking smarter, not harder. As far as the game's one cutscene goes, the lip syncing is decent enough and the animations aren't completely stilted. Certainly better than other movie games. What's especially decent about the visuals is that the character models in the cutscenes seem to be the exact same ones as the gameplay, or at least functionally identical. Oftentimes you'll see a disparity between the pre-rendered models and the gameplay ones, but here the game looks equally passable no matter what. Passable is about as far as I would go though, because the levels visually aren't all that great. They look fine, but the color palettes are very bland. The first cup, for example, is Green Swamp, Washed Out Green Forest, and Brown and Green Cemetery. The second cup is City, City, and Castle, all of which have mostly cobblestone roads and stone buildings. Like I said earlier, each cup does feel cohesive, but cohesive isn't necessarily a great thing when they all sort of blend together. If you play all 4 cups in a row, it feels like you played maybe 5 or 6 tracks, not 12. The real highlight visually is that each character has a totally unique vehicle. Some are animals, Donkey's is the dragon, some are even just planes. It's a nice touch. Speaking of touch, I also briefly want to touch on the game's loading screens. Is bad. They're pretty bad. Moving on, the audio side of the coin is actually also decently solid. The soundtrack is way better than it has any right to be for a shovelware game. Some of these themes actually gave me some early Ratchet & Clank vibes. Hell, the first track's theme is straight out of something like Splatoon. It's a little off-putting at times, I won't lie to you, but it's also a welcome surprise considering what I usually hear with this garbage. Smash and Crash Racing even has voice acting, seemingly pulling the same voice doubles that Super Slam did. The characters each have a few lines that they'll shout out in different scenarios during races. I do wish that there were more than a small handful of lines, just so that you didn't have to hear the same two a dozen times per race, but they do add a good amount of charm to the otherwise bland-ish levels. It goes without saying at this point, but Gingy is still the best character. Kiss my frosting! Gingy, what the fuck? Altogether, Smash and Crash is essentially a harmless game as far as the presentation goes. If the game were more optimized and it looked a little bit better, I would feel more comfortable giving it a better score here. Still, the game launched at a budget price of $30, and it is shovelware after all, so for shovelware, it performs better than expected in most places. I'll give it a silver bolt, even if that feels kind of weird to say. And that, folks, is Shrek Smash and Crash Racing. It's not bad. That's the best I can really say about it. It's a game. I played it for a couple hours. It was fun, I guess. Still Shrek. Still Shrek.